Well, thank you for coming. Welcome to Zillow. Grab a seat. My name is Nate Mock. I'm Vice President of Product Teams at Zillow. I manage some of our development groups here. We're really excited to have you. Thank you for coming. We love hosting Products That Count. We've been doing this now for 4 months-ish. So it's exciting to see the community grow. We're getting this group going, and we've had some great speakers. So I just want to welcome you to Zillow. Hope that you enjoy the time and the space. We have some people here. Recruiter Joe, back by the wine. If you want more wine or you want to talk about Zillow jobs or openings, he's your guy, or both. Ideally both. We have lots of wine, so don't be shy. We also we have a lot of openings at Zillow: design, product, development. So if you or anyone you know is interested, please reach out to us again, or you can talk to Joe. Otherwise, thanks again for coming. We really appreciate you coming.
Great, and I want to thank everyone again for being here and the volunteers tonight as well. How many people are attending Products That Counts for the first time tonight? Wow, okay, great. My name is Anne, and I'm the head of chapter for Products That Counts. And Products That Count was founded in 2014 by a woman by the name of S.C. Modi. And what she wanted to do was create a network of product managers and product leaders and others in the product space to come together and form a community and learn together. So that's what Products That Count is about. And we're also very fortunate to have incredible sponsors, including Zillow, but we also have Amplitude and Particle and others. So I just want to say a great thank you to the products, and we also want to make sure that we're representing the community and bringing together things that you want to learn as well. So we have a really dynamic group of speakers that are at Zillow headquarters every second Wednesday of every month, who share a unique perspective of building product. So tonight, what we're going to do, I'm going to introduce the speaker, and then Matt's going to talk for about 30 minutes. We're going to have some rich Q&A after that, and the event is being recorded. So for the sake of the recording, if you could speak up while you're asking the question, or if you could wait for a microphone, that really helps with the recording. And then after we wrap up, we are actually going to have a shout out. So if you're looking for a job or recruiting, or there's something exciting that you'd like to share with the crowd, you have an opportunity to do that. And then we'll wrap up with more networking, and we also have a meetup group as well. So if there's something you'd like to discuss offline, grab a beer, grab a coffee, or in community, that'd be fantastic. So I'd like to introduce Matt Conway. I've known Matt for a while, and so if you looked up Matt before you came, you might have noticed he has comments like, Matt's a unicorn, Matt's a Zen Master, and I have to say, you bring in a lot of talent for design, gaining users' perspective, technology. You really are an incredible person with whom to work, and I know that you have a lot to share tonight, so I'm really excited to hear about design and ethics as well. So without further ado, welcome Matt Conway. Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you. Great. Thanks very much. That was very sweet. I don't know where Zen Master comes from. Anybody who knows me, I am not very Zen. And the people who know me best are laughing hardest. So yes, that's right. That's right. So thanks very much. And it's great to be here. I am very excited. And tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about design ethics and asking a question of what's your threat potential. That picture that's up there is actually a painting that hangs on my wall. It amuses me, and I think sometimes ethical questions show up looking like you kind of wish that it was either Hello Kitty or Darth Vader, but most real problems show up this way, right? And there's a hard part of teasing things apart. I'm particularly excited to be here because I don't usually see a lot of product owners and maybe designers kind of all in one room. And there's two reasons why that's exciting to me. And I don't want to freak Ann out here, but I have an announcement to make. I have my own startup that I want to get some advice on. I want some feedback on. And this is what it looks like. I guess before I get started on that, I just want to become clear on some vocabulary here. That I identify myself as a designer. If anybody who thinks of themselves as a designer, raise their hands. Okay, product ownership kind of shows up that way sometimes. How many people think of themselves as pure product owners? Like that's how you'd show up. Just a few. Okay, technologists. Yeah. Okay. Right. Sure. I'm going to use the word designer in kind of the broadest sense possible. I think of myself as sort of a design strategist, somebody who thinks about the broad experience end to end, plus the business and the technology side of things, and kind of an integrated whole. So if you hear me talking about designers, I'm talking about that. It's the people who show up with intent. Jared Spool talks about this a lot. He talks about design is the rendering of intent, and that's if that's what you do. If you have a desire to put something out in the world, then you're on the design bus with me. But I want to talk to you a little bit about getting all of you together to talk about an idea I've had, and this is the problem I'm trying to solve. Okay. I know. I mean, and what I know it's adorable, but what a pain in the ass, right? Nobody likes herding cats. Everybody talks about herding cats, and herding cats is terrible. So I really want to solve this problem, and I'm very excited by the prospect. I'm pretty sure I'm going to make a killing on this, right? There are so many interesting prospects here. I can't even begin to tell you like why this thing is very cool, okay? I've got a blockchain strategy. Cats are three-dimensional, so there's a VR angle. I'm not sure what that is yet, but I'm going to work that bit out. And I am sure that I'm going to make it rain. Now, the one thing that I want to impress you on is that it actually comes in as a pretty good price point as well. It's very affordable. And what I want to know is just all up, what do you guys think? Who thinks this is a bad idea? Yeah, there's some hands. There are not nearly enough hands. So, show of hands again. Bad idea? Bad idea? You, sir, why is this a bad idea? I'm very excited. You're raining on my parade. What's up here? I'll repeat what you say. Who's the target market? Yeah. Okay. Why else is this a bad idea? How are you going to monetize it? $50 a month, man. That I am going to monetize it is the intent. But yes, how are you going to do that? What problem am I trying to solve? Yeah, it doesn't solve a real problem. Might be a small addressable market. Might be a little pricey. This is a terrible value proposition, right? And that's fine, I guess. I mean, that's a little disappointing. I was kind of thinking that the cat thing would be a thing, but it's okay. I have another idea. Let me show you what this idea looks like. I've learned my lesson. I've done my homework now. You guys are a buttoned-up crowd. You're pretty rigorous. Seems you've gone to business school. So it's this thing. Catapult. Right. It's for propelling cats, as you do. Why is he talking about cats so much? We don't know, right? So the idea here is, now let me ask you this. Is this a good idea? No. Why is this not a good idea? Same thing, right? Ha! I've got you, though. Wrong. The value proposition of this is actually quite good because I took my homework from you and I went off and I got some research done. And it turns out that this is actually an excellent idea, as it turns out. I have pre-orders, so I know that I've got income coming in, people just waiting for me to build the catapult. And it turns out catapults are really very very high margin. Once you build them, you just kind of amortize the cost of the trebuchet over and over again. You can make a fortune doing this. Not only that, but McKinsey tells me that small animal ballistics is like a $1 billion unaddressed market. So we're gonna have like the terrier trebuchet and I don't know, like hamster cannons and things like that. But our first one's gonna be the catapult. Okay. So take me at my word. I've done my homework. This thing is a great business opportunity. It's going to make a fortune. Now is catapult a good idea? Why not? Not ethical. What? Turns out being mean to animals is wrong. That's right. I mean, not to not to belabor the obvious here, but in order to have a good business, you have to do good, not just to do financially well. You have to be bringing, you have to be not causing harm or suffering in the world. And doing that to a cat doesn't qualify. So it doesn't matter how much money you're going to make if it's actually going to cause harm. And that's at the crux of design ethics, right? Is knowing how your actions, how your products actually bring value and goodness into the world, and how they don't accidentally bring pain and suffering and bad effects, unintended bad effects into the world. And so this topic is extraordinarily broad, right? And I've got like 30 minutes here. And so I want to put some fences about things I'm not going to talk about, right? I'm not talking about some philosophical issues. If you're into that sort of thing, do we have any philosophers in the room or any philosophy majors? Frustrated? Ah, yes, not right. The guy in the back with the bad ethics. That's good. Yeah. You and I should talk later because I'm not qualified to talk about these things. There are some people who think about design ethics in terms of like what can you bill a client for and what can't you. I'm not going to talk about that, though. I think it's very interesting. I'm also here not to call out people by name. I'm not going to shame companies or shame people. There's a lot of bad stuff in the world, and we all know some of the news stories. I'll be listing off some of those. But I'm going to try and keep this not about making you feel bad about things. And I'm not going to give you a crisp list of ethical rules to live by. What I'm going to do instead is just ask questions. I'm going to give you a framework of questions that I think you should be thinking about that helps organize your thinking about how your product works. What's it mean to cause harm? Can we reduce harm, and do we have an obligation to try? And how much of the responsibility falls on us versus maybe a bad actor, user that would actually distort what we've done in the marketplace for bad ends, right? So to emphasize this, I'm a designer. Okay, I am not an ethicist. What I am is concerned, and I'm thinking that most of the people in this room are, spending an evening up here at the lovely Zillow Tower because you're concerned as well. I mean, you could be home, with your feet, up on the couch or something like that. So I'll try to make this worth your while. Having said this, that I'm not an expert, I should ask: are there any ethicists in the house? And I am serious about that. Does anybody actually have the role of or title of design ethicist? Isn't that funny? There are no hands here, right? Now, if you worked in a large hospital, there'd definitely be a medical ethicist on staff to answer some of the most, grievous and weighty questions that happen in the world of medicine. Computers are, like software is eating the world. We've heard this before, right? The things we do are as consequential as medical questions. Sometimes there actually are medical things that we're doing as designers. And yet we don't actually have this as a title or a role in our discipline. I think that's actually rather interesting. And I have a sense that might not be true for much longer. I will point out a few concerned voices. While we don't have any experts in the room tonight, there are experts or people who are pundits or evangelists for this sort of thing. We don't have time to list a lot of names, so I want to drop a few. And the first is a guy named Tristan Harris. Anybody know about this guy? Yeah. So his claim to fame is this phrase, time well spent. He's an ex-Googler, and full disclosure, he and I don't know each other. We've never overlapped. I've only been at Google for about a year. But he's left to chase this idea about what does it mean to have an experience that's designed to attract your attention and keep it and hold it. Is there a way of measuring customer satisfaction or user benefit in terms of, we've all been there where we've spent an hour or two or more, mumble something, hours, looking at anything that seems to have a feed, right? If it's Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. How many times have you shut your laptop lid and just have this defeated sense of self-loathing, like, oh man, that's 3 hours I'm not going to get back, right? What Tristan wants to do is to be thoughtful about building interfaces in such a way that you feel good about the time that you do spend. Whether it's 15 minutes or 3 hours, you feel like that was time that would have been not spent better any other way. And that's extraordinarily hard to do given kind of the junk food binge feeding kind of framework that we're working under right now. He's also obviously thinking about the way that these experiences change people's behavior and their thinking. Like, what does it mean to touch 2 billion minds in one day? And if you don't think that your designs change people's minds, then I don't know what you think you're doing, because designs are exactly designed to do that. The second guy I want to pick out is Mike Montanaro. He's famous or infamous, depending on your point of view. He's a very strong flavor. He's got the ability to drop the F-bomb quite a lot, so be careful playing his videos at work. But he has a rather passionate point of view that about everything, but he has a passionate point of view about designing with intent. That if you don't, that most of the bad things you see are not because people are trying to do bad things. It's that designers fail to think deeply enough about the effects of what they're doing, and it's through inattention that bad experiences hit the world. Mike's website has a designer's code of ethics. So if you're looking for something prescriptive and specific about design ethics, he would be a good place to go start. They're rather general, as you might imagine, but he's actually tried to lay down some rules. And finally, I'd like to talk about kind of a local set of heroes, the Artifact Group. Artifact is a design consultancy, a strategy consultancy. Love them to pieces. They do excellent work. And they just recently put out this thing called the Tarot of Tech. How many people have seen this in their feeds just recently? Yeah, it's made the rounds a bit. It's a set of 12 cards fashioned to look a little like tarot cards. And on the back side, each one of them has a theme, like this one is the Big Bad Wolf. And the themes here are provocative questions that you should be asking yourself about your products and how they actually show up in the world, and what would it mean for them to break in the face of extreme use or a bad actor or conditions that are not the mainline use cases that you tend to think of. So like, what would a bad actor do with your product? And to think a little bit like bad actors and ideate a little bit in that mode a bit. Maybe there's something you can do to keep that from happening, or to frustrate a bad actor to slow them down a little bit. There are 12 cards in the deck, and I believe just today they announced that they are selling physical cards. They went on sale today. And again, full disclosure, I get no kickback for that little advertisement I just did. There are so many more people, and I just dropped 3 names in order to entice you into thinking about doing some Google searches and finding people like this and these people. There's a large, diffuse, disconnected conversation happening right now that I think is quite healthy for us. What I want to do now is pivot a little bit and talk about users and villains, the people we love and the people we maybe love a little bit less. I mean, mostly the stuff that we do as product designers and product owners, we try to do our best. We try to bring great things into the world. We try to do good, but it doesn't always work. I mean, yuck. I mean, look at this list. I'm sorry, this is the type here is a little bit small, but this is a list of 20 things. And the way this list came out is I just sat down and I started typing just from memory, just some terrible things that happened. And I got to a list of 30, and I cut it back to these 20. I mean, surely we can do better than this, right? I mean, we've got racist chatbots and killer robots on the list. Like, these things are real or near real, and they pose, I think, an ethical challenge to us, and poses the question, like, what do we think we're doing here? Some of these things are very, very thinly veiled major headlines, and we know the players involved, and others are very general, like just general accessibility fails. How many products go out into the world that have no accessibility affordances to them at all? Shame on us, 21st century, right? I promise I won't wag my finger too much during this talk, okay? I'm as guilty of that as anybody else, to be clear, right? I'm no saint here. I've built lots of non-accessible products. Not proud about that, but yuck, right? Like, what sort of people do this? And, Pogo was right. We have met the enemy, and it is us, right? It's product owners, it's designers, and users as well. And it comes from errors and inattention and lack of foresight, and sometimes bad intent. Sometimes there are people out there really trying to do the wrong thing. So I want to talk a little bit about designers and users and their intentions, and be a little bit formal, maybe a little bit methodical about this. We can talk about, designers that have good intent, and I think that's all of us, right? We all are trying to do the right thing. But let's admit, there's a second class of people out there building products and building platforms and building systems, and they're up to no good. They are not trying to do right in the world. Russian botnets, right? It's mischief. But users come to us in the same form as well. People are just trying to get good things done, and people who have bad intentions as well. And this forms 2 by 2, 4 different use cases that are kind of interesting to unpack very lightly. So, and the first quadrant actually is the really easy one. That's the value proposition. Good people trying to do good things and good customers trying to get those good things. And as product owners, you probably spend a tremendous amount of energy thinking about your value proposition. What is it? Is there a way of optimizing it? Is there a way of refining it and reformatting it? Am I doing everything I can for my customers? Who are my customers? Can I understand who they are and what their needs and their pain points are? That's all good stuff, and it has to keep going. In the upper right, though, you would have a case where a designer has actually created something terrible. and they're trying to attract an innocent to their website to do something bad. Well, if you're that kind of person, well, you're a jerk, right? And the people who do identity theft and phishing that fall into this category. But jerk is not the worst of it, right? You could be a bad designer servicing bad users. And when I say bad users, I don't mean users who do things poorly. I mean people who have bad intent. People are trying to bring harm into this world. This is a little bit weird because if you are Dr. Evil and you've got terrible customers, it looks a little bit like the upper left-hand corner, right? It's exactly the same. It's actually the catapult situation, right? You're an arms dealer, basically. And your concerns might be exactly in the language you use about trying to, get weapons and grenades into the hands of people who would like to throw them. Probably sounds a lot like the stuff in the upper left-hand corner. The only problem is you become unshackled from any kind of ethical framework. You don't care about whether you're doing good or bad, but you'd like to make some money. But the last one, the thing I'm going to spend most of the talk here today talking about is the lower left-hand corner, where bad users, where people with ill intent come to a well-intentioned website with the intent of causing mischief or worse, okay? And this is what I'm calling a threat. This represents a threat to other users, a threat to your platform, to your business, to your reputation, to your brand, and ultimately to your business. If these people come to your work and take your tool or your platform or your product and bend its intent towards something that you didn't want to do or you're ethically opposed to, they're in the driver's seat now, and they're actually making hay with what you've actually poured a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into. And so what I want to impress upon everybody is that there is a lot of work to be done thinking about those cases. And I want you to spend as much time thinking about the threat potential as you do about the value proposition. You're consumed with doing right by your customers, and that's right and proper. A little bit more effort or equivalent effort thinking about how to keep the wolves at bay is not such a bad way to spend your time. And I hope I can convince you of the opportunity, actually the rather exciting opportunity to do that. So, in summary, what I'm suggesting is guarding against people with bad intent who would use our well-intentioned products in an abusive way is an ethical requirement for us. It's not a nice to have. Can compact that. Guarding against threat is absolutely part of our job description. It's just like a security engineer, right? These guys think about this all the time, right? You build a system and then you think, well, gosh, if I were trying to break into the system, what would I do? And then you take the next step to put another moat, another line of razor wire, another wall in between you and the bad guys, and you iterate, right? Now, how would you break in, right? They do that because they can think like a villain. They can think like the bad guy. And they start with the question like, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen here? Well, I want to talk a little bit about taking this kind of mental stance on. What does it mean for designers to think like a villain? I have some hopeful news here. Like designers are uniquely gifted with empathy and inquiry skills. We know how to ask questions. We know how to walk a mile in our user's shoes. Well, we can walk a mile in our user's shoes even if we don't like our user very much. Even if it turns out this guy is Darth Vader. We can get inside this guy's head because we know what it means to exercise empathy, and we have tools that allow us to, and practices that allow us to do this. So let me propose a series of framing questions. I promised I wouldn't give you rules, but I'd give you something to think about. What would it mean if you sat down with your team, your technologists, your designers, your PMs, your business leaders, and had a brainstorming session to answer questions like these, like how might my product enable or magnify harmful behavior, right? To really screw up the world requires a computer probably, so that's the starting point. It quickly leads to a question of scale. Like what would it mean if I got 1 billion users on this platform? That's not really a pathological case, but if you have a tiny percentage of people in your pool who are, say, in your online community making bad decisions, when it scales to 1 billion, you may have no ability to scale your defenses. One person in 10,000 might be manageable, but if you scale that up to 1 billion, what is that? 100,000 bad actors in your social network? That's a mess. How might a bad actor use my product to embarrass us or our customers? Surely you didn't build a platform to do that, but is it possible that a bad actor could actually bend your tool to make that happen? And the word in red here, you could replace with all sorts of verbs like harassment and defrauding people and identity theft. You could go to town just trying to fill just that blank in. Who's the target of the harm? Could be anybody. It might be people on your platform. It might be people who has nothing to do with your platform. So think about that. What does it mean to harm people? What does it mean to harm the environment? Now, how could a product possibly harm the environment in a digital sense? Who here has seen the electrical needs, the power needs for Bitcoin? Yeah? Yeah. There may not be enough solar in the world to make that thing keep going. But what else is on that list? What if your villain is not an ordinary user? What if it's an oppressive government? Not like that's ever happened, right? What if it's a third party or a partner? Like you're fine, but you share data with a third party and they let it go. Not like that's ever happened. Mobsters, we know that the Russian organized crime is behind a lot of mischief and a lot of identity theft. And sometimes you hire people and you trust them and they're awesome and they're great, and then they turn out not to be trustworthy. How are you defending against that? That's a little kind of an overlap between designers and security operations, by the way, right? And this is an interesting and fruitful overlap in skills and conversation. Well, if you have all these different kind of villains, to me it actually suggests that there may be some good reason to talk about personas for villains, right? The bully, the thief, the terrorist, the troll, right? We have personas for the people we're trying to serve. We should probably think about personas for people we are not trying to serve, and how do we build systems that frustrate the particular needs and the particular pain points that these people have, amplifying their pain points instead of making them go away. And I think that list actually gets much longer, right? I mean, inside whatever your domain is, whatever it is you think you're doing and what customer base you're trying to serve, that list changes, and it can get maybe short, or can get probably very long, depending on what kind of pathological behavior you think you can imagine. And so the challenge I put to the room here is, what other questions should you be asking, right? I've given you kind of a starter, like an intuition pump to get the wheel going, but surely there are more questions along these lines that you can be asking about what the worst possible thing could be that would possibly happen to you. A little note of vocabulary, like I think we all know what a use case is. It's a user with a goal for a benefit, like Bob is trying to do a thing to make something awesome happen. We call that a use case. And use cases define the core, the backbone of what we think the value proposition is. It's a fleshing out of what the benefit is to particular kinds of people in particular kinds of goal situations. So that's a use case. But I'd like to extend this vocabulary. I saw this word in the wild, and I don't think I've ever seen it I've never seen it in proper use in a work situation, but the idea of, just patterning off of this, a villain with a goal for harm is an abuse case. And just like you enumerate use cases and you work them through and you work development around them, I suggest that there is some effort around expressing explicit abuse cases, certain kinds of personas trying to shoot for certain kinds of harm on your platform. I think that actually it's a compact piece of vocabulary, and I'd just like to give it off to you because I think I was impressed and enlightened by it. Okay, so you have a list of things that can go wrong, and you have a list of people who might do it and the targets that they might be trying to harm. You've got a fairly complete picture of what the grim side of all of this is, but what do you do? What should you do? What can you do? Well, you might do nothing. I mean, you might decide that you've built yourself a hammer and the pounds nails and you can hang pictures on it just fine, but there's nothing you can do to keep a person from using that hammer to break pane window of glass on the jewelry store and stealing all the diamonds. You can't stop that from happening, and bad actors will find ways of taking neutral tools and doing bad things with them. What I'm suggesting not is that you always do nothing, but if you're going to do nothing, that you do it with intent, that you don't do it out of laziness or failure to think about it. Make it an explicit decision that you're making. You can see there are other things that I put up here, like just figuring out maybe you should just warn people, or maybe you can actually take an action that shuts them down and locks them out from doing bad things. And maybe the problem isn't a solution isn't in tech at all. Maybe it's social forces. Maybe it's shaming people, calling them out. You can sanction people maybe through social platforms, like badging them in a weird way, or stripping social status from them. If they've got some sort of badges from a game and they're starting to be a jerk inside the game, you can demote them that way. Blocking, banning, and ghosting are all things too. And there's, in the limit, if things get really, really bad and really dicey, you should allow yourself the freedom to go to police authorities. Things don't usually escalate to the illegal, but sometimes they do. How am I on time? Oh, goodness. Okay, so I am not going to share an anecdote. I'll do that during the Q&A if I can find a place for it. Anecdote. Glad we got that on film. Okay, anecdote. The anecdote actually springs from this last point about going to the law enforcement. I want to share with you a story about a Fortune 500 company I know, and I'm going to anonymize this to the best degree I can. I don't think I can name names. I think I get in trouble if I did this. But it was an e-commerce company with a very powerful e-commerce platform. And for purposes of this discussion, fluffybunnies.com. They're a bunny e-commerce site. And what these guys found during the kind of a log traversal, much to their horror, is that this bunny-related e-commerce platform was being used for human trafficking. True story. It was being used for human slavery. Not clear to you how bunnies and human slavery go together? That's fine. I'm trying to whitewash over that. But trust me, it was grim. It was alarming. It was very upsetting. And it was very real. We had all the evidence to see that this was going on. Now, there are two reactions you might take, which is, I didn't build this platform for that kind of nonsense. Not my problem. That people are using my hammer in a weird way. I cannot be bothered. But that's not what this company did. This company said something else, and they said, oh no, not on my platform you don't. Not on my watch. Worked too hard to make the Fluffy Bunny juggernaut what it is, and I'm going to take some responsibility, even though I'm not at fault here. I've done nothing wrong. There are bad people taking my good work, and they're using it as an abusive weapon against completely helpless people. And we have the ability to do something about this and take some unimaginable suffering out of the world. We're going to rise to the challenge and do the right thing. So they actually called the FBI and Interpol, and they talked to all of the other bunny-related e-commerce sites and their natural competitors and said, we have a vested interest in making all of this go away because we're having this problem. I'm damn sure you're having this problem too. And there's no reason for us to compete on this point. We should be cooperating on this point. And the net result of this was, I want to say, many dozens of bad guys were put in jail, and many, many more dozens of victims were rescued out of their plight and returned home, and the suffering for these people stopped. It was amazing. It was actually an example of a heroic moment. It was a time when I felt most proud to be working alongside heroes like this, and they never said a damn thing in the public about it. They they just wanted to do the right thing, and there was a little internal bragging because we got the bad guy and we wanted to pat ourselves on the back. But I think my message to you is the presence of bad guys in the world is a challenge that you can rise to, and it is an opportunity for you to act like a hero. Now, you might not be convinced about that. You might think, no, I'm really not interested in being a hero. That's not why I got into this business. I'm just a product designer, just a product owner. Do I really have to do this? Am I obliged to act that way? Are product owners really on the hook for every abuse of their product? And here's where it gets a little opinionated on my part, and I apologize I'm not going to apologize, but I'm just going to warn you. I think the answer to this is you're not entirely off on the hook, but you are a little bit. You see, users are still responsible for their actions and their choices. You got somebody bad doing something unspeakably awful, that's on them, and the full weight of justice and fairness should fall on them, and if that includes jail time, that's what that is, because they made that choice. And if you believe that, then you must also believe, I think, that designers are on the hook for our choices. Everybody has some culpability. We're on the hook for whatever actions, inactions, or oversights we take, especially in the face of knowledge that something bad is going on. Now, I'm not saying you have to have perfect knowledge. That's not possible, and it's too high an unfair standard to hold people to. There will always be things you can't know and you won't know. And you're not on the hook for those things, but you are on the hook for the things you do know. And when you know that something bad is happening, you have to take some action, some kind of thoughtful action. Even if it's the first bullet on my list, which is to do nothing. You need to make a decision. Once you know that your product is being used or abused in a way that harms people, you have to consider how you want to intervene, because I strongly believe that ethical design cannot be willfully ignorant. You can't just put your fingers in the air and go, not my job. It is your job, because you're trying to do awesome things in this world. The good news is, though, I'm really excited by the opportunity. I'm energized by the idea that designers maybe live on the front lines of these things, and product owners might live on the front line, because the kinds of skills it takes to defeat, miscreants like this is empathy, curiosity, and creativity, and we are known for that. We have these skills in great quantities, and it gives you the opportunity to be a hero in your own domain, right? I think we all want the same things. Right? You want people to be proud of you. You want to pay the bills. You're not trying to spend all of your money chasing down bad guys. I get that. But you also want to be able to sleep at night, right? And you got into this business because you thought you could make the world awesome. And making the world awesome is not an option. That's part of what you got into this for. It is the definition of being an entrepreneur, being a product owner, and putting something in the world that makes people, solve some problem, some substantive problem for people. And if making the world awesome means that you have to grapple with somebody who's trying to undo your good work, well, that's what you have to step up to. But again, I'm excited by that. You can't let the bad guys win. You work too hard for what you do. And I'm absolutely optimistic that you can do this. That you can find the space and you can find the time. I know you can. I know we can do this. We have the power to pull this off. And my request to you is to think about how you can mitigate harm by misuses of the technology, right? You'll thank yourself, you'll thank your coworkers, your customers will thank you, your investors will thank you. And it's all from thinking about the threat potential, the things that can go wrong with your system. Kittens of the world will thank you as well. And on that point, I'd just like to say thank you for your attention and your time. It's a gift to be able to talk to a group of people like this. And happy to take questions at this point. Yeah.
Hey, so you gave your list of those 20 things that you think are bad.
Yeah.
I'm just a little bit curious, and you don't have to go into specifics or anything. Is there anything that you see coming up in the future that is particularly concerning as technology continues to develop at a really startling rate and software continues to eat the world?
Yeah, software is eating the world. So what's the next big threat? What's the biggest, worst thing? Nah, it's fine. We're gonna be fine. Now, I think there are some really easy targets you can talk about. Everybody is talking about artificial intelligence. I think that's the center of gravity for this conversation right now. And I'm very encouraged by some of the leaders in those fields actually see the ethical challenges on the horizon and are rising to it. They're making it an explicit conversation. I think one of my favorite lines I've heard in the last 6 months is that artificial intelligence is money laundering for bias. And it's a great analogy, right? Because you can take a lot of terrible pattern matching and hide it behind software, and no one ever knows where it comes from. Like, who has these terrible attitudes? And you'll never know because it's the software that's doing it, and it allows us to wash our hands and abdicate our responsibility around those things. Also in the AI space, the way pattern matching typically works, say through a deep learning network or an ANN or one of these neural network kind of architectures, is you've got a lot of internal nodes that have weights on them, and they make decisions and they can classify things, kitten, not kitten. But if you get something that isn't a kitten and is classified that way, it might be very difficult to figure out why it made that mistake. The current architectures are built in such a way as to not give you a human-readable receipt as to what went on. There are no if-then statements that you can debug in a kind of a classical stack-based architecture. These decision networks are trained up, and sometimes, like in the case of the Go playing machine, right? That machine trained itself. It played Go against itself a million times in a row, and it got better than all of us. The Homo sapiens now lose in these games. So I think about that for insurance purposes. When you have an autonomous car, for example, and it gets into a wreck, well, why did it plow the car into the tree? You will never find an if-then statement that says, well, if such and so drive into tree, right? There's no explicit logic around those things. If it fails to see the ball bouncing in front of it, or if it gets confused by sunlight, it may be very difficult to know why those things happen. So I'm a little concerned about our ability to be responsible stewards of these things if we don't know why or even how our machines work. But I know there are ethicists who are thinking about that as well, so I remain hopeful.
Sort of in that vein, do you have thoughts on, not getting into company names, but like where you can send them your DNA and you get a report on like your background?
Right.
Maybe now we're selling that anonymized just for research purposes.
Right.
But insurance and lots of other potential applications there that would be profitable.
That's right. That's right. What do you see as sort of the big threat in there?
That it looks flashy and it's new, but like my DNA is one of the few things that isn't in the cloud somewhere yet. And I don't know what the future applications would be there yet. So it's.
Do you have an intuition as to what could possibly go wrong?
Insurance rates that are tiered based on really targeted, like, oh, you've got a 5% risk of cancer. Like, sure, you get it for less than somebody who's got an 80%.
Sure. Of course, they have to tie that DNA strand back to you somehow.
Sure, but that's possible, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I was trying to make you feel good for 1 second.
No, yeah. Like, do you have thoughts or concerns in that space at all?
I will admit that I actually I did the 23andMe thing. Okay. And the instant I dropped the thing in the mailbox, I had deep regrets. I was like, okay, which is worse, them doing the bad DNA thing or me tearing a mailbox apart and trying to get my thing back, right? I think that's a real concern. And I think so long as the healthcare insurance industry is motivated by profit, they will have the motivation to go do these things. That's as far as I'm going to pry that barrel of monkeys open, right? That's a can of worms about how we pay for healthcare in this system. In some ways, I think there's a very relaxed form of thinking about privacy, which is, why do I care if you know my social security number? It's just a bunch of digits. So long as you don't do anything bad with it. It's like when you try to steal my identity using my social security number. Now that's a problem, right? So I don't know if we can ever get to a place where transparency is allowed and we punish just the bad behaviors. In which case you'd be fine if your DNA was out there and everybody could look at it. And that might actually be good for research, like you say, so long as some 16-ton weight doesn't drop on you because of your sharing. That's me rambling. I don't think I answered your question.
So more often than not, I find that couple of interfaces that try to warn the users about certain kinds of, misdeeds or whatever that could happen if they entered things wrong or things like that.
Right.
I think they are a little bit verbose, and it ends up, at least I'll talk for myself, I feel like skipping it.
Yeah.
I just want to skip it and do what I want to do. Right. So the call to action of such kind of things, I feel, is not duly addressed in the way the applications are being designed. They want to put a lot of information out there, but it's just not good enough or alarming enough for me to immediately look at it and say, oh my God, I can do this. Your thoughts on that? Yeah,
I mean, obviously there's no crisp, simple rule to follow, like how to design a dialogue like that. We all know what dialogue fatigue is, right? And it's a very old school way of protecting a dangerous or risky operation is an "Are you sure?" box and yes, no. It only takes about 2 of those before it becomes snowblind to them, right? It's like, set your car on fire, yes, no, yeah, sure, fine, that's fine. Wait, what? What was that about fire, right? And so I think it's incumbent upon us as designers to think about, like, the first use experience, first day, the first week, the first month, and how fatigued and practiced and muscle memory bound we get where we stop seeing these warnings. And when the warnings become ineffective, it's essentially no warning at all. And I suppose as developers and designers, we can get all haughty and think, well, just blame the victim. It's like, well, I said I'm off the hook. That's what I'm trying to do, is to not be blamed. That we should rise to a higher standard than that, right? We should think about things for, we see interfaces and patterns like this right now where the operation might be slightly destructive, like you blow away an email, but it's very easy to undo. And the invitation, the call to action for the destructive action happens right after the action, not before, not guarding the action, but retrieving afterwards. It's when the dialogue box says, Are you sure you want to send the incoming missiles warning to all of Hawaii? Yes, no, and you're not paying attention to that. When it's a thing you can't pull back, when it's a message that gets sent, it's like there's no remove from inbox. At that point, I think you need to be very careful on a case-by-case basis about how to keep the bad thing from happening. Sometimes you can put some effort in there. Everybody hates CAPTCHAs, but if you can put some friction in the system to slow things down, we're often thinking about how to make things go faster. But I think slowing a dialogue down that is very dangerous and difficult or impossible to undo, that's something to think about. Yeah.
As you were talking, I was thinking about the Milgram study in the 1960s. We have executives, we have leaders who ask us to build things, right? And in many ways, we as engineers, we as designers, we as product managers have this ethical responsibility to say no, right?
I was only following orders.
Right. I had this realization: if every engineer, if every designer said no to building products that they viewed as unethical, well, those unethical products would be ugly and they'd be broken.
Is that a better place or a worse place in your mind?
Well, it would be easier to identify the unethical product.
I wish that were true. There's enough bad design in the world that I think people could hide behind that, but that's a lovely thought.
I had one last question.
Yeah.
So Zillow did a really good thing by launching the Zestimate, and it changed the ecosystem in a way that instead of agents having an incentive to sell that $200,000 house to $180,000, because to them the commission difference was marginal, even though it was a difference to a person. This is kind of Freakonomics effect. We created sort of this universal expectation of the value of a home, right? Mm-hmm. So those turn on the lights. I feel like that was kind of a cool ethical thing that we did. At the same time, as information becomes available, we start to realize, we actually know where there are 5-1 ARMs or why there are 3-1 RMs or 7-1 ARMs, like basically people taking on risk in their loans based on the estimate that they see on Zillow, right? Because they know that the next house is likely to sell for that price. So as we start to see, people take on those things, right, increasing risk, potential foreclosure, where do we need to take consideration our ethical responsibility for the stability of the nation's homes? Is that something that, that's a whole other leap from protecting against villains. That's more around, we start to see risk and we start to see opportunities. We start to see people taking on risks because of, mortgages or companies that are kind of targeting them, saying you can afford a home, and then maybe aren't as transparent with that risk.
That's a great example of where scale alone may laden you with ethical responsibilities that you wouldn't have if you didn't have scale. If Zillow was 1% of its current size, or wind the clock all the way back, you wouldn't have the ability to move the nation's real estate needle only but so much, right? You'd have a little bit of leverage. But at the point that you're at now, I don't know, one misstep, could you send us back into a spiral? It's hard. Probably not, but it's a question it's worth asking, right? I don't know. Do you feel like I don't want you to tell stories here at work, but it would seem like you would need to have these constant conversations. Like, what's the worst that could happen, and what are the side effects, and how would we know we're seeing a bad effect? Putting sensors in place so that you see things is part of what I mean by you have the moral responsibility to not be willfully ignorant, right? Even if you put sensors up and you imagine some crazy pants scenario, having the sensors in there and having them always be dark, that's some safety. That feels good.
I guess I'd add to that, if we kind of as product owners follow Matt's guidance of thinking about the abuse cases, that we can identify those things. But then furthermore, I think that we can think about how to make features that would benefit our users. And so it's not just out of protecting ourselves, but out of surprise and delight features of, hey, user, here's the numbers on what you're currently doing. Here are recommendations that might help protect you in the long run. And, that type of thing will build the brand loyalty and stuff like that. So I think it's, making sure that you spend the cycles to plan around it, and then thinking of ways that these abuse vectors can be turned into benefits for the customer.
That's a really good point, Adam. The fact that you're even trying to defend against bad actors and being seen in the act of doing so can give good actors an extra sense of security. And make them proud of you. Yeah, there's a brand burnishment that comes with that.
We have time for one more. Great.
Hi, thank you for your time. I just wanted to ask, so we're pretty familiar with the research and tools that we would use to put together a value proposition. Mm-hmm. What would you say are some tried and true methods or methods you've used to put together research for the threat box?
Honestly, I don't think there are any. I mean, maybe I'm overstating things a bit much, but I don't see a lot of. I've been doing design for 20 plus years and taking complicated things and making them easy and thinking about their effects in the world. And I don't know that there's some really broadly robust frameworks. We got a bunch of people in the room. Has anybody else seen any kind of frames or tools or any kind of mechanisms for thinking about threats? I think it's a frontier. I think this is kind of an edge where we're kind of all a little bit in the dark. I think our friends in security actually have some thoughts about this. Right? You would hope a little bit. And to keep in mind, like the concerns that the SecOps people, the security people have, and what I'm talking about in terms of threat here are at least semi-overlapping, right? They have some of the same concerns. I'm imploring us to not think so much about how to protect our infrastructure or protect our networks. SecOps will think about that. But protecting the PII and the personally identifiable information from our users, that's a shared concern. And you can start the conversation maybe with the security folks like, how do you think about this? And like, well, you're probably going to get a lot of engineering talk back at you. You're going to have to squint and do some analogies. But I'm sorry, there's not a better answer. You should go build us one and tell us what you got.
Right. Some user focus groups. Yeah.
There you go.
Great. I just want to say thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, guys.
That was very, very good. I learned a lot, so thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Also, asked me to give you a product set counts notebook. Yes.
I love moleskins.
Thank you. And then just a few things to wrap up. Again, thank you to Matt. Each of you will get a survey for a Net Promoter Score, and there's an opportunity there to give us some very frank feedback as well in the open text box, because we really want to build a community that all of us enjoy. And then the next event, July 11th, the events are always here at Zillow, second Wednesday. We're having a talk about where technology meets innovation in the healthcare and well-being space. August, we have Snap, working on finalization for a September speaker, which seems really cool. And October is the former CMO of Expedia, so we have some really good things lined up. So I'm excited what's coming forward. And then shout outs. So if somebody here is looking for a job or has an announcement, we've had people come up who are working with university and doing studies or whatever they might be. That's great. And then before I give the microphone, I want a show of hands of people who are new to Seattle. Yeah, so I want you to look around. There's a lot of people in your community as well. So leverage the leverage the meetup group or whatever as well, because there are a lot of like-minded people who are interested in product and also growing in this community too. So shout outs, anybody? Seattle's a little shy sometimes. All right, we have one. Google's hiring, Zillow is hiring.
And so you should talk to these 5 great interns here. Raise your hands. We have Amazon and Microsoft represented. Anywhere else? No? Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Ben, we're going to be here for another half hour. Just enjoy, finish up the sandwiches, and thank you again for your time tonight. Really appreciate you being here. Bye.